Sign it." Adrian Cross dropped the divorce papers onto the marble table and crossed his arms. "I don't have all day." Kate stared at the documents, her hands perfectly still. "You don't even want to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," he said. "You were fine for who I was 5 years ago. I'm not that man anymore." He picked up his pen, signed his own copy, and slid it toward her like a restaurant check. If you have never seen a man throw away a fortune and call it freedom, stay with us because this story will show you exactly what that costs. Subscribe to our channel, follow every part until the very end, and tell us in the comments what city you are watching from. We want to see how far this story travels. Kate Hale signed the papers. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She pressed the pen to the line, drew it across in a single clean motion, and set the pen down with a quiet click that somehow echoed louder than anything Adrian had said in the past 20 minutes. She straightened the documents, aligned the edges, and pushed them back across the table with both hands, the way a person slides a completed transaction to a bank teller. "There," she said. "Done." Adrian had expected tears. He had been bracing for them, the pleading, the shaking voice, the appeal to 5 years of marriage, the accusations, the long dramatic scene he had privately rehearsed, counters to in the bathroom mirror that morning. Instead, he got nothing but that one quiet word and the sound of her chair being pushed back. She stood. She was wearing a gray cardigan he had seen 100 times, soft and slightly oversized, the kind of thing she wore on ordinary Sundays when she had nowhere to be. Her hair was pulled back simply. She was not wearing much jewelry, just small pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother, she had once told him, though he could not now remember the details of that conversation. She looked to him exactly as she always had, unremarkable, gentle, the kind of woman who blended into a room. She picked up her bag from the chair beside her, a worn leather tote she had carried for years, the kind that accumulated small creases and soft scuffs, the way a life accumulates small memories. She looped it over one shoulder. "Take care of yourself, Adrian," she said. She walked to the door of the penthouse. Her steps were even. Not hurried, not dragging. Even. She did not look back. The elevator doors opened and she stepped inside, and then she was gone, and the penthouse felt enormous and very quiet, and Adrian stood at the marble table with his signed divorce papers, and the inexplicable, irritating sensation that something had just gone wrong, though he could not have said what or how or why, because on paper, everything had gone exactly according to plan. He poured himself a drink. He told himself it was relief. He was very good at telling himself things. Adrian Cross had built himself from the ground up, or so he believed. And that belief was the most important architecture in his life. More important than the penthouse, more important than Cross Dynamics, more important than anything else he owned. He had grown up in a small town in Ohio, the son of a contractor who worked too hard and earned too little, and he had decided at 17 that he would never be his father. Not because he did not love his father, but because he had seen what it looked like to give everything to a life that did not reward you. And he had decided, with the particular cold clarity that sometimes visits 17-year-olds who are paying attention, that the world rewarded a specific kind of man and that he intended to become that man. He had. By every visible measure, he had. Cross Dynamics was a mid-sized tech firm that had made Adrian genuinely wealthy. Not celebrity wealthy, not the kind of wealth that put your face on magazine covers every quarter, but the serious, quiet kind that meant he never looked at a price before ordering something, and that his financial team operated out of a separate office, and that when he walked into rooms, people repositioned themselves slightly toward him, the way plants lean toward light. He had met Kate at 28 at a conference where she had been working as an assistant for one of the panel moderators. She was quiet and competent and laughed easily, and he had been drawn to her in the way that very driven men are sometimes drawn to stillness, the way a person who lives in a city craves a long walk somewhere without traffic. He had not thought about her background much. She had been vague about her family in the way that people who have had complicated childhoods sometimes are, and he had not pushed because frankly he had been too busy pushing in every other direction. They married. She ran their home with extraordinary competence. She remembered every person he had ever mentioned in passing, every birthday, every preference, every minor logistical complexity that made his life run without friction. She was warm and attentive and deeply, quietly intelligent in ways he had noticed but never quite examined the way you notice a well-engineered machine without stopping to understand its components. But she was not ambitious. Not publicly, not in the way that he had started needing as Cross Dynamics grew and as his world began to demand a different kind of wife, the kind who appeared in photographs well, who commanded a room, who reflected back to the world the version of Adrian Cross he was building. And then he met Jessica Vane. Jessica was 26 with 2 million followers, and the kind of beauty that was specifically engineered for documentation. She existed in photographs the way certain buildings exist for postcards. She was loud in a way that people called charismatic. She wanted things constantly and talked about wanting them in a way that Adrian found electrifying because she wanted the same kinds of things he wanted: visibility, status, arrival. She told him he was extraordinary. She told him he had been wasting himself. She told him over a dinner that cost more than Kate's monthly grocery budget that a man like him deserved to be seen. He had come home that night and looked at Kate in her gray cardigan and felt for the first time something close to impatience, and the impatience had grown. It had taken him 4 months to decide, and then 2 weeks to do it. He had told Kate on the Tuesday morning efficiently, the way he delivered presentations to his board. He had used phrases like growing apart and different trajectories and the next chapter of my life. And Kate had listened without interrupting, seated at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around her coffee cup, and when he was finished, she had simply asked, "Is there someone else?" And he had said yes, because Adrian Cross did not at least lie to people's faces. She had nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "Thank you for telling me." That was all. He had been waiting for the scene. He had never gotten it. Now 3 days later, the papers were signed, and Kate Hale was gone, and Adrian was standing in his penthouse with a drink he did not taste, and Jessica was on her way over, and everything was by his calculation exactly as it should be. His phone buzzed. "Jessica, on my way up, dress for dinner, we're going to the Meridian thing." She had added 3 emojis, a star, a champagne glass, and something he had to squint at. He typed back, "See you in 20. He finished his drink. He did not think about Kate again that evening. He would regret that eventually, but not yet. The first hint that something was different came 11 days after the divorce was finalized. His CFO, Marcus Reed, appeared in his office doorway on a Wednesday afternoon with the expression of a man who had rehearsed what he was about to say and was already not happy with how the rehearsal had gone. "We have a situation," Marcus said. Adrian was reviewing expansion projections. He did not look up immediately. "What kind of situation?" "Harrington Capital called this morning." Marcus came in and closed the door, which was unusual enough that Adrian looked up. "They're pulling out of the Series D." Adrian set down his pen. "Why?" They didn't give a specific reason. The call was short, very short. Their managing director said they were, quote, reassessing their current portfolio commitments and that they wished us well. They wished us well. Yes. "Marcus, they've been committed for 8 months. The term sheet is essentially—" "I know what the term sheet is," Marcus said with a patience that suggested he had been working himself up to this conversation for some time. "They've pulled out. I'm telling you because I think you need to know, and because that was not the only call today." He opened the folder he was carrying and put it on Adrian's desk. Mercer Holt also called. Same language. Portfolio reassessment. Very short. Very final. Adrian stared at the folder. Both of them, same day, same morning. The silence in the office had a particular texture to it, the kind that forms when 2 people are both looking at the same thing, and neither of them wants to be the one to say what it is. "Get me on the phone with Harrington's managing director," Adrian said. "I tried. He's not available." Then his assistant, also not available. Adrian stood up. "That's not a coincidence." "No," Marcus said carefully. "It is not." What followed was a week of carefully controlled professional alarm, the kind that happens above the surface of normal business operations, mostly invisible to anyone not paying close attention. Adrian made calls. His calls were returned politely with the warmth of people who are communicating a message they would prefer not to state directly. Meetings were rescheduled. Partners who had been enthusiastic became carefully neutral. A European consortium that had been in active discussion went silent entirely. Not rudely, not with explanation, simply silent the way a door closes in a quiet house. Adrian had been in business long enough to recognize the shape of this. Something was communicating through the system. Not loudly, there were no press releases, no public statements, no dramatic withdrawals. Just a very consistent, very quiet withdrawal of warmth, as if someone had turned down a thermostat that he had not known existed. He pulled his intelligence team in. He asked them to look for any pattern, any common thread. They came back in 4 days. "We found something," his lead analyst said. Her name was Priya, and she was 29 years old and had never in the 18 months she had worked for Cross Dynamics looked uncertain about anything. She looked uncertain now. It's nothing illegal, nothing we can act on, but there's a flag." "What kind of flag?" "A designation in certain institutional databases, the kind that the biggest players use to communicate risk assessment. It's not public. It's internal to a network of about 60 of the top-tier sovereign wealth funds and institutional investors globally." She paused. "Cross Dynamics has been flagged in that network." Adrian was very still. "By whom?" "The flag originates from an entity called the Ascension Trust. We don't have much on them because they're intentionally opaque. They don't publish, they don't publicize, they don't have a public-facing leadership structure. But they are," she searched for the right word, "real. Very, very real. The institutions that pay attention to their flags represent combined assets in the range of several $trillion." The word trillion sat in the air. "Why would Ascension flag us?" Adrian said. "We don't know. They don't explain their flags, they just issue them." Adrian thought for a long moment. "Can we reach them? Is there a contact, a representative, anyone?" "We've been trying. There is no public contact mechanism. They reach out to you, apparently not the other way around." He sent Priya out and sat in his office alone for a while. He thought about who might have enough reach to trigger something at that level. He went through his list of business enemies, of deals that had gone badly, of rivals who might have both motive and connection. He ran through it 3 times. He did not think about Kate. He would not make that connection for another 2 months. Jessica had moved into the penthouse within 3 weeks of the divorce. She arrived with 7 suitcases, a ring light, a dedicated camera setup, and opinions about the interior design that she communicated with the confidence of someone who had never been told her opinions were optional. "This kitchen is sad," she said on the first evening standing in the kitchen that had cost $200,000 to install. "It photographs gray. We need warmer tones. And the living room furniture, it's fine, but it's giving very first marriage energy, which is not the brand we're building." Adrian looked at her. "The brand we're building? You and me, babe. We're a power couple. That means everything is content." She was already framing a shot with her phone. "This skyline is genuinely incredible, by the way. Do you know how many followers the right penthouse can add? Like, locationally speaking, you are sitting on a gold mine of aspirational content." He had found this exciting once. He was finding it slightly less exciting now in the living room, surrounded by her suitcases, with Priya's report sitting in his briefcase. "Jessica," he said. I need to talk to you about something, about the business." She looked up from her phone. "Is this going to be a long thing? Because I told Camille we'd be at her launch by 9. A flag has been placed on Cross Dynamics by a major institutional entity. It's affecting our funding." She lowered her phone by about 3 inches. "Okay, what does that mean practically?" "It means investors are backing away. It means our Series D is in trouble. It means I need to be working this problem." She processed this for a moment. "But you'll fix it, right? Because the Vienna thing is next month, and I've already arranged the content strategy for that trip, and I really need Jessica." "What?" "I just told you the company may be in serious trouble." She tilted her head slightly. "I heard you, and I'm asking if you're going to fix it. You always fix things. That's literally your whole—" She gestured at the apartment at him at the skyline. "This whole thing." He looked at her for a moment. "Yes," he said, "I'll fix it." He went into his office and closed the door. He called Marcus. He called his lawyer. He called 3 people who owed him favors and 1 person he did not particularly like, but who knew people he needed to know. He worked until 2 in the morning, and when he came out, Jessica was asleep in the bedroom, and the ring light was still set up in the corner of the living room, and there was a champagne glass with a lipstick mark on the coffee table, and the apartment felt in that moment very large and very empty. He picked up the champagne glass. He washed it. He stood at the kitchen window and looked out at Manhattan, all that bright density of ambition and money and striving, and for the first time since the divorce, he thought about Kate. He thought about how she used to be awake when he worked late. Not waiting for him, not performing, waiting just awake reading or making tea or doing something quiet in the kitchen, and she would look up when he came out and say something ordinary like, "Did you eat?" And the ordinariness of it had once felt to him like smallness, like lack of ambition, like the weight of the ordinary life he was trying to leave behind. He understood, standing at the window at 2 a.m, that it had not been smallness, it had been ballast. He had thrown the ballast overboard and called it liberation, and now he was drifting in ways he could not fully articulate, and that was not a comfortable thing to understand at 2 a.m, so he stopped understanding it and went to bed. But the thought of Kate stayed, quiet and small, the way Kate herself had always been quiet and small. Sitting somewhere at the edge of his mind, like a woman who knows she doesn't need to raise her voice to be heard. The month before Vienna was the hardest professional month of Adrian Cross's life. He lost the Series D completely. Not all at once, it dissolved incrementally, partner by partner, each withdrawal courteous and brief and irrefutable. He pivoted to alternative funding sources. Those sources were cooler than expected. He reached out to relationships he had cultivated over a decade. Some responded. Most were carefully unavailable. His public profile was still intact. He was still photographed at events, still mentioned in the right publications, still invited to the right dinners. The surface was smooth, but the surface was all that was holding. At one of those dinners, a private thing, 12 people a host whose name carried weight in 3 industries, he found himself seated next to a man named Gerald Forsyth, who ran a sovereign wealth allocation firm out of Geneva, and who had the specific bearing of a person who has seen everything and is no longer surprised by any of it. They talked about the market. They talked about tech valuations. They talked about Vienna, which came up because 3 other people at the table were also going to the Golden Masquerade, an annual event that Adrian had known about peripherally for years, but had never attended, had never been invited to, had considered a slightly mythologized rumor, until the invitations apparently became real enough that people discussed them at dinner. "Do you know who hosts it?" Adrian asked. Gerald looked at him with a mildly curious expression. "The Ascension Trust, technically, though the chairwoman herself organizes it. This year is the first time she's hosting in person, apparently. Usually it's through representatives." He took a sip of his wine. "Very unusual woman. I've seen her once at a distance. She has the kind of presence that makes a room rearrange itself." Adrian's hand tightened very slightly on his fork. "What's her name?" "Publicly, no one uses it. Everyone in those circles just calls her by her family name, Vanderbilt." The fork made a small sound against the plate. "Vanderbilt," Adrian said. "The Hale Vanderbilt line specifically. There's a whole structure to it. The trust is ancient, private, essentially ungovernable from the outside. Billions doesn't begin to cover it. The kind of money that predates the concept of new money." Gerald smiled slightly. "Old doesn't mean stagnant, though. Whoever this woman is, she's modernized the whole apparatus. She's put Ascension on a completely different footing in the last 2 years. Much more active. Much more deliberate about where it places and removes its influence." 2 years, Adrian said, and his voice was very level. "Give or take. Something shifted over there around that time frame. New leadership, new philosophy. The people who know. The people who don't find out the hard way." Gerald looked at him with the pleasant neutrality of a man who is not quite saying something. "You're going to Vienna?" "I received an invitation, yes." "Then perhaps you'll meet her." Gerald returned to his food. "I hope you do. She's quite something." Adrian drove home that night very fast and very carefully, which is what he did when his thoughts were moving faster than he wanted them to, and he went to his office and sat down and pulled out a piece of paper, actual paper, which he rarely used, and wrote a name at the top of it. Catherine Hale Vanderbilt. He stared at it for a long time. Kate had never once mentioned that name, not the Vanderbilt part. She had been Kate Hale, just Kate Hale with her gray cardigans and her worn leather tote and her grandmother's pearl earrings, and she had lived in his penthouse and managed his life, and never in 5 years given him the smallest indication that she was anything other than what she appeared to be. He thought about the timing. The trust had become more active 2 years ago. Kate had been with him 2 years ago. Kate had left 8 weeks ago. The flag on Cross Dynamics had appeared 11 days after the divorce was finalized. He pulled out his phone. He searched for anything public on the Ascension Trust. He found almost nothing, a few references in financial journals, careful and vague, the kind of language used to describe things that are powerful enough not to need description. He searched for Catherine Hale Vanderbilt. He found even less. He searched for Kate Hale. He found photographs of his own wife at events he had attended standing slightly to his left, in photographs that were nominally about him. She was always slightly to his left. He had never noticed that before. Standing at a precise, comfortable distance, neither hiding nor presenting herself, just there. Watching. He put his phone down. His heart was doing something unusual which he identified as fear, and which he did not like at all, because Adrian Cross had not been afraid of something in a very long time. He picked up his phone again and sent his assistant a message. Vienna. I need everything arranged. Full preparation. This is the most important event of the year. He sent the message. He looked at the piece of paper with Kate's full name on it. He folded it carefully and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket close to his chest, and he told himself it meant nothing, and the fact that he kept it rather than throwing it away was the only honest thing he did that entire night. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, printed on cardstock so heavy it felt like holding a piece of architecture. No logo, no excess language, just a date, a location, and 4 words beneath the address by personal selection only. Adrian had held it for a full minute before setting it down, and then he had picked it up again because the weight of it demanded to be held. Jessica had seen it on the kitchen counter that evening and immediately photographed it. "This is incredible content," she said. "A masked ball in Vienna. Do you know how cinematic that is? I'm thinking black gown, full glam, and we document the whole trip from the airport forward. The followers will lose their minds." "It's not a content trip," Adrian said. "It's a business meeting. Everything is content, babe. That's the whole point." She was already scrolling through something on her phone. "I need to find a designer who can do a custom mask. Something that reads powerful but also feminine. Not too covered, my cheekbones need to be visible." He looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up the invitation and put it in his briefcase. "I may be going alone," he said. The silence that followed had a specific temperature to it, the kind that signals the beginning of an argument that neither person is quite ready to start yet. Jessica set her phone down on the counter. Carefully. The way people set things down when they want the act of setting something down to communicate something that they have not decided how to say. "Excuse me, Hughes, this event, it's not a social occasion. It's the most important professional meeting I've had in years. I need to be focused. And I'm a distraction." "In this context, yes." She stared at him. Her face moved through several expressions in quick succession, surprise, injury, calculation, and landed finally on something cooler and more measured. "You've been really different lately," she said. "You know that like something is off with you. The company's in trouble. I told you that." "Right, but you've been off since before all this funding stuff, since the divorce." She folded her arms. "Since Kate left." He went very still. "That's not relevant." "Isn't it?" She tilted her head slightly, and in that moment, she was sharper than she usually appeared, sharper than the ring lights and the follower counts, and the champagne glass with the lipstick mark sharper and younger, and more perceptive than he had wanted her to be. "You never talk about her, like not once. And when someone never talks about something, it's because they're thinking about it all the time. Jessica, I'm just saying, Vienna is a business trip. I'll be back in 4 days." She looked at him for another long moment. Then she uncrossed her arms, picked her phone back up, and walked toward the bedroom. At the door she stopped without turning around. "Get me something nice from the hotel," she said. "Something expensive." And then she was gone. He stood in the kitchen alone and realized that the conversation had just told him something about the relationship that he had been avoiding knowing for several weeks, which was that it had the structural integrity of something that looks solid until you press on it, at which point you discover that the core is hollow. He did not press on it. Not yet. He had Vienna to get through first. Marcus came to him 3 days before the trip with the latest numbers, and the numbers required the particular kind of courage to look at that financial people develop over years of looking at bad numbers professionally. Cross Dynamics had lost 31% of its projected Series D. Two secondary investors, who had been soft committed, had formalized their exits. A licensing partnership with a Seoul-based firm that had been in negotiation for 7 months had gone quiet in the way that things go quiet when the other party has made a decision they have not yet communicated. "The Seoul situation," Adrian said. "Any explanation?" Their deputy director said they needed more time to assess the regulatory landscape. Marcus's voice was neutral in the specific way of someone who does not believe the explanation they are relaying. She was very polite, very brief. Like everyone else. Like everyone else. Adrian leaned back in his chair. "What's our runway?" 14 months at current burn rate. 12 if we bring forward the infrastructure build-out we've been postponing. Marcus paused. 9 if we lose the Henderson contract, which is currently on hold pending their own board review. What triggered Henderson's board review? Marcus did not answer immediately. This was answer enough. "The flag," Adrian said. Their general counsel mentioned very obliquely that they were conducting routine due diligence on all current partnerships, but the timing aligns with yes. I believe so. Adrian stood up and walked to the window and looked out at the city. He had made decisions from this window before. He found the view clarifying. Today, it just looked like a city dense and indifferent, full of money moving in directions he could no longer reliably predict. "Vienna," he said. "Yes. If I can get a direct conversation with whoever runs Ascension, if I can understand why the flag was placed and what it would take to remove it." "Adrian." Marcus's voice had something in it that was not quite warning and not quite sorrow. "We've looked into this. The people who have had flags placed by Ascension, there's no pattern of removal. There are no documented cases of a company having the flag lifted after it was placed. It's not like a credit rating where you can improve the underlying conditions and have it reviewed." He stopped. "I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying I don't know of it happening. There's a first time for everything." Marcus was quiet. "I hope so," he said with the careful sincerity of a man who is not sure he does. The flight to Vienna was 9 hours, and Adrian spent most of them working, because work was the only context in which he still felt fully competent, the only space where the cause and effect logic of the world still held. He reviewed everything he knew about Ascension. He reviewed his company's valuation materials, the real ones and the presentation ones, and he noted the distance between them with the clear-eyed precision of a man who knows that reckoning is approaching. He drafted 3 different versions of what he might say if he got the meeting. He discarded 2 of them. He thought about Kate somewhere over the Atlantic. He thought about her grandmother's pearl earrings. He thought about the way she had said, "Take care of yourself, Adrian," as if she meant it, as if she were genuinely wishing him well, which was either the kindest thing anyone had ever said to him in that kind of moment, or the most devastating, and he had only just now, at 35,000 feet over an ocean, begun to understand which one. His phone had a message from Jessica, a photo of a resort somewhere warm tagged thinking about a solo trip while you're gone. Could be content. Could be space. Haven't decided. Followed by a sun emoji that managed to communicate something colder than the word space had. He put his phone in his jacket pocket and looked out the window at the dark. The hotel in Vienna was old and enormous and certain of itself the way buildings are when they have been beautiful long enough to stop worrying about it. His suite was on the 7th floor overlooking a courtyard where the snow had been shoveled into perfect margins along the paths. He arrived in the early evening, washed his face, changed his shirt, and sat at the desk to go over his notes once more. His phone rang. Unknown number. Austrian area code. He answered. "Mr. Cross?" A woman's voice, low and precise with an accent he could not immediately place. "I am calling from the Ascension Trust Event Coordination Office. You have received an invitation to the Golden Masquerade for tomorrow evening. I am calling to confirm your attendance and relay several protocols." "I'll be there," he said. "Excellent. The event begins at 9. Masks are mandatory from entry through midnight. The dress code is formal black preferred. You will be provided a number upon arrival, which is how guests are addressed for the first half of the evening." A pause. "The chairwoman holds private audiences beginning at 11. These are by request facilitated through the event staff. If you wish to request an audience, you should indicate this to the attendant at the east entrance before 10:30. He gripped the phone slightly harder. "I want to request an audience." "Of course." No surprise in her voice, no reaction at all. "It will be noted." The line went quiet, and then it ended cleanly without pleasantries, and Adrian sat with the phone in his hand and thought about the fact that someone had just told him there was a formal mechanism for getting what he needed, and that he had accessed it, and that tomorrow night he would either fix everything or understand for the first time that there was nothing left to fix. He was at the Golden Masquerade by 9:15. He had been to events that called themselves exclusive before. This was something different. The building was a private estate on the edge of the city, and the people inside it had the quality of those who do not need to signal their importance, because their importance had already been established so comprehensively that signal would be redundant. Presidents were in this room, not former presidents, sitting presidents, or their equivalents, the heads of 3 central banks, the chairmen of institutions whose names appeared in financial history textbooks, a woman who ran the largest private sovereign wealth fund in the Gulf, identifiable only by the particular way that 2 security personnel positioned themselves near her without appearing to. Adrian Cross, who considered himself successful, felt briefly like a graduate student who had wandered into a faculty dinner. He accepted a glass from a passing server and did not drink from it. He moved through the room with the controlled deliberateness of a man who knows he is being observed and has decided to behave as if he is not. He found the east entrance attendant at 10:15. He gave his name. The attendant noted something on a small card and said with great courtesy that the chairwoman's schedule would be confirmed by 11 and that he should remain available. He nodded. He moved back into the room. He talked to a man from Singapore who was involved in infrastructure development across 4 continents. He talked to a woman from Frankfurt who had restructured the pension systems of 3 European nations, and who regarded him with the pleasant blankness of someone who had not heard of him and did not plan to look into it further. He talked to Gerald Forsyth, who was there as Adrian might have known he would be, who raised his glass slightly in greeting and said, "Vienna agrees with you," in a way that communicated the opposite. At 11:05, a young woman in black touched his arm lightly from behind. "Mr. Cross, the chairwoman is ready." His stomach moved in a way that he would not have called nerves because he was Adrian Cross, and he did not get nervous, but that is what it was. He followed her through a side corridor, through 2 sets of doors, and out onto a private balcony that overlooked the estate's garden, lit below by warm light that turned the snow into something that looked purposeful like decor. The balcony was enclosed on 3 sides open to the garden view, and the cold came through in a clean, steady way that Adrian found clarifying. A woman stood at the railing with her back to him. She was in a dark gown, floor-length, the kind of understatement that costs more than most people make in a year. Her posture was completely still, in the way that only people who have learned to command space without movement achieve. Her mask was still in place, a dark, elegant thing that covered the upper half of her face. Her hair was up. Something about the line of her neck, the angle of her shoulders, the particular stillness of her. She turned around, and Adrian Cross felt the floor of the world drop out from under him. She reached up and removed the mask. Kate. His Kate in a dress that cost more than his first car, with her hair arranged by someone who understood how to make simplicity look like a sovereign act. And her eyes, those same gray eyes he had looked into for 5 years, across dinner tables and morning kitchens, and ordinary Sundays were now looking at him from a face that had not changed at all and yet was completely different because the context had changed, and context is everything. And the woman standing at this railing in Vienna, at the center of a room full of the most powerful people on earth, was not a woman he had ever actually known. "Hello, Adrian," she said. His voice did not work for a moment. He made it work. "Kate. Catherine," she said pleasantly, not correcting him with heat, just correcting him. "Catherine Hale Vanderbilt, though you could have known that at any point. I never hid my name. You simply never asked." He stared at her. His mind was moving very fast and producing very little that was useful. "You're the chairwoman." "I am." "Of Ascension." "Yes." This is how long—" He stopped. Reorganized. "How long have you known about all of this? The trust, the leadership?" "Always," she said. "I've always known. I was managing active portions of Ascension's portfolio while we were married. The complexity of the trust structure meant that it was never visible from the outside, but the work was real." She tilted her head slightly. "The gray cardigan was real too, for what it's worth. I genuinely liked that cardigan." Something about that detail cracked the professional surface he was trying to maintain and got beneath it. He crossed to the railing and stopped at a distance that was neither close nor far. "Why?" he said. Why the secret? Why did you stay hidden for 5 years in a life that was so much smaller than what you actually— Because I wanted to know who you were, she said simply. Not who you were to the right kind of wife. Not who you were when there was something to gain. Who you were to someone you thought had nothing. She looked at him steadily. I wanted to know if you could love a person rather than a position. The silence on the balcony was very complete. Kate, you told me I was holding you back, she said. Her voice did not waver. It was the voice of a woman who has already processed every feeling attached to these words and arrived somewhere beyond them. You told me you needed someone who fit your future, in front of a lawyer, in front of papers in our home. She paused. So I signed, because you told me everything I needed to know. He opened his mouth. He closed it. I didn't flag your company out of anger, she continued. I want to be precise about that. Ascension doesn't act on emotion. We act on assessment. And the assessment of Cross Dynamics, when I looked at it properly, really looked at it not as your wife, but as the person I actually am, revealed things that would have come to light eventually, regardless of our marriage. The valuation irregularities, the code origin issues, the way your employee compensation structure was designed. She looked at him calmly. I moved faster than the market would have. That's the only difference. He felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the Vienna air. The code issues are documented, she said, thoroughly. That was Marcus's call, the acquisition of Adrian. Her voice was not unkind. It was precise. I know whose call it was. He looked at her. The woman he had dismissed as unremarkable. The woman he had left for a girl with a ring light and a follower count and opinions about kitchen aesthetics. The woman who had lived quietly inside his life for 5 years while holding more power than any person he had ever met. He felt something he had not felt since he was 17 years old in his father's house in Ohio, watching the particular mathematics of effort and reward, and that something was the specific shame of having made a calculation that turned out to be catastrophically wrong. Is there anything I can do? He asked. She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. You can come to a formal review meeting, she said. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., my team will be there. You'll present the state of Cross Dynamics, real numbers, real practices, everything. No performance, no positioning, just the truth of what you built and how you built it. She looked at him steadily. If there's something worth saving, that conversation will reveal it. If there isn't, that will also be revealed. He nodded. Adrian. She said his name the way she used to, not harshly, not warmly, just directly, the way she said everything. I need you to understand something before tomorrow. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because it's the right process. Ascension doesn't destroy things that have value. We don't work that way. She paused. But we are completely permanently honest about what has no value, and we act accordingly. He looked at her. And what do you think I have, value or no value? She held his gaze for a long moment. Her face was unreadable in the way that very still water is unreadable because there is so much beneath it that the surface gives up trying to show it. Come to the meeting, she said. Find out. She put her mask back on. She turned and walked back through the balcony doors into the light and the music, and the doors closed behind her with a soft, definitive click, and Adrian Cross stood alone on a private balcony in Vienna, in the cold, looking out at a garden he would not remember holding a champagne glass he had never drunk from, and understanding for the first time in years, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, that he was looking at the actual shape of what he had thrown away. Not the money, not the power, not the access or the influence or the institutional weight of a name he had never bothered to learn. The person who had sat across from him at 1,000 breakfasts and known exactly who she was and waited and watched and given him every opportunity to know her. He had looked at her and seen a simple housewife in a gray cardigan, and she had let him. Because the truth about who you are, she had once understood, is not yours to announce. It reveals itself. In time. In the choices other people make. In the silence after they have made them. He stood in that silence now. It was very loud. He did not sleep that night. He lay in the hotel bed and looked at the ceiling and ran the meeting on the balcony through his mind the way you run a film. You cannot stop watching, not because you enjoy it, but because the image has burned itself into something behind your eyes and will not release you until you have understood every frame of it. Kate's face when she turned around, the mask coming off. the particular quality of her stillness, the kind that is not emptiness but its opposite, the stillness of someone who has so much contained inside them that movement would be imprecise. He had been married to her for 5 years. He had not known her at all. That was the thought that kept arriving every time he tried to push it aside and think practically about tomorrow's meeting, about numbers, about what he was going to say to a room full of Ascension's people in 9 hours. He had not known her at all. Not because she had deceived him, she had said as much, she had never hidden her name. The name had simply never mattered to him because she had not seemed like someone whose name would matter. He had looked at Kate Hale and seen what he expected to see, and what you expect to see is what you look for, and what you look for is what you find, and he had found exactly the version of her that confirmed everything he already believed about his own life and its requirements. He got up at 5:30. He showered. He put on the best suit he had brought, which was very good because Adrian Cross had always understood that a suit was a position before it was clothing. He sat at the desk and went through his files one more time. The real numbers, the real practices. Kate Catherine had told him to bring the truth of what he built and how he built it, and he sat with that instruction for a long time. Because the honest answer to that question was more complicated than any presentation he had ever given, and he was not sure he knew how to give it. He left the hotel at 8:40. The Ascension Trust's Vienna office was not what he had imagined, which had been something grand and deliberate, a building that announced power the way certain buildings do. It was instead a townhouse on a quiet street, narrow-fronted and old, with a discreet brass plate beside the door that said nothing except a number. He had been given the address by text, no sender name. He rang the bell at 8:58. A man opened the door. Not security, not a receptionist, but a man in a good suit who simply said, "Mr. Cross, this way," and led him through a hallway and into a room where 4 people were already seated around an oval table. He recognized none of them. They were all in their 40s or 50s, 2 women and 2 men with the contained professional manner of people who have evaluated many things and maintain the same face during all of them. At the head of the table was an empty chair. Kate walked in 2 minutes later. She was in a different outfit than the night before, simpler, if anything a charcoal jacket over a white shirt, her hair down rather than up. She was wearing the pearl earrings. She sat at the head of the table, opened a folder, and said without preamble, "Thank you for coming, Adrian. Let's begin. No performance, no reference to last night, no warmth and no coldness, just the clean efficiency of a person who has a great deal to do and allocates time accordingly." He sat down across from her. "Good morning," he said. She looked up briefly. Something crossed her face that he could not name. Then she looked back at her folder. "We have 3 hours. My team will lead the review. I'll ask questions as needed." She nodded to the woman on her left. "Elaine." Elaine opened her own folder and looked at Adrian with the expression of a surgeon regarding a patient. "Let's start with the Series B acquisition, the Morrow Technologies deal 2019. And they began. What followed was the most grueling professional experience of Adrian Cross's life, which was notable given that his professional life had included a hostile takeover attempt, 2 SEC inquiries that had come to nothing, and the complete collapse of a product line that had taken 3 years to build. The Ascension team went through Cross Dynamics with the particular thoroughness of people who already know all the answers and are asking the questions to see whether you will tell the truth or choose the version that flatters you. The Morrow acquisition, Elaine explained with the careful neutrality of someone reading from a factual document, had involved code that Morrow's original developers alleged had been incorporated into Cross Dynamics products without proper licensing attribution. The legal settlement had been private, sealed, and structured in a way that was technically compliant but operationally evasive. "The code is currently running in 4 of your enterprise products," Elaine said. "The attribution has never been corrected in any public documentation." Adrian said, "The settlement was signed and agreed to by all parties." "Yes," Elaine said, "that's not the same as it being right." The second man, whose name was Thomas, walked him through the valuation methodology Cross Dynamics had used in its Series C, which had projected revenue curves based on user growth assumptions that were, Thomas explained with precise courtesy, significantly more optimistic than any internal forecast had privately supported. "The gap between what your team believed internally and what was presented externally is about 40%, Thomas said. The word for that gap, in most regulatory contexts, is material misrepresentation. It's aggressive forecasting, Adrian said. Not every company has a 40% gap, Thomas said pleasantly. The third person, a woman named Grace, focused on employment practices, specifically the non-disclosure agreements that junior employees had been required to sign, agreements that were, she explained, structured in a way that prevented them from reporting certain kinds of concerns to regulatory bodies, which was in several jurisdictions where Cross Dynamics operated illegal. Adrian listened to all of it. He had known in the way that you know things you have not looked at directly that these areas existed. He had not been unaware. He had been strategically looking elsewhere, which is a different kind of awareness, the kind that accumulates interest over time. Kate had not spoken yet. She was making notes in her folder, not aggressively, just writing. At 10:15, Elaine finished her section and closed her folder. Thomas and Grace did the same. The room went quiet. 4 Ascension people looked at Adrian Cross. Kate looked up. Your turn, she said. He had prepared 3 versions of his response. He looked at her face, and all 3 versions became unusable, because all 3 were in varying degrees the kind of response you give when you are still primarily interested in the outcome for yourself. And he understood, looking at her, that response would not work here. Not because she would see through it, though. She would, but because he would know he was giving it. And for the first time in a very long time, he found he could not do that. He took a breath. The Morrow Code should have been attributed publicly. The settlement resolved the legal liability, but it didn't correct the record. That's mine to own. He looked at Thomas. The Series C projections I told Marcus to build to the upper end of plausible because I needed the round to close, and I told myself it was optimism. It wasn't. I knew what I was doing. He paused. The ND, as our general counsel flagged the jurisdictional issue in 2021. I put the review on hold because we were in the middle of the Henderson negotiation, and I didn't want the distraction. That was a choice. A bad one. The room was quiet. Kate had stopped writing. She was looking at him with an expression he had never seen on her face in 5 years of marriage, which was the expression of someone who has been surprised by something, not dramatically, just the small surprise of finding something in an unexpected place. Is that everything? She asked. He considered. There's more in the detail. Nothing structurally different from what your team found. The outlines are accurate. She nodded slowly. She made one more note. She closed her folder. Give us 20 minutes, she said. He was shown to a small sitting room with coffee and a window overlooking the street. He sat down. He had never felt lighter and heavier simultaneously in his life. He drank the coffee. He looked at the quiet street and thought about his father in Ohio, who had worked too hard and earned too little and had slept nonetheless every night of his life with the uncomplicated sleep of someone who had done his work honestly. Adrian had always privately considered this a failure of imagination. He was reconsidering that assessment. At 10:43, the man who had let him in came to the door and said, "The chairwoman will see you." He went back into the meeting room. The 4 team members were gone. Kate was alone at the table. He sat down. She looked at him for a moment without speaking, and the look had in it something that was not professional and not personal, but somewhere between the look of someone who is trying to see the whole truth of a thing before she speaks about it. "The honesty matters," she said finally. "I want you to know that. It's noted. It's real. But honesty about what happened doesn't resolve what happened. The code issue requires public correction and retroactive licensing. The Series C misrepresentation is going to draw regulatory attention regardless of what Ascension does. It's already been flagged to the relevant bodies. The NDAs need to be voided and the affected employees need to be contacted." She paused. "These are not things we do to Cross Dynamics. These are things that need to happen." "I understand." "The question I've been sitting with since last night," she said, "is whether there is a version of Cross Dynamics that can exist after all of this. Something built correctly on a foundation that isn't fraudulent." She leaned back slightly. "There might be. The core technology is genuinely good. 2 of your engineers, Priya Dasan and a man named Cook, in your sole liaison team have work that is legitimately valuable. Not the company as it currently exists, but there might be something." He looked at her. "What are you telling me?" "I'm telling you that Ascension's position on Cross Dynamics will not change. The flag stands. The institutional withdrawal stands." She held his gaze. What I'm also telling you is that the regulators will be more interested in the company's leadership than its engineers, and that if you initiate the corrections yourself proactively before the investigations formalize, there is a narrow window in which the outcome for you personally is different than it will be if you wait and let it happen to you. He was very still. You're giving me a warning. I'm telling you the truth. What you do with it is yours. The word yours sat in the room. He looked at her. Why? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, because you told the truth in this room this morning. You didn't have to. You could have performed. You're very good at performing. You chose not to. She paused. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm responding to a fact. He nodded. He looked down at the table. The surface was old dark wood, solid and unpretentious, and he found himself thinking irrelevantly that Kate had always chosen furniture like this for their home, solid, honest things, and that he had often suggested they needed something more impressive, more reflective of where they were going. She had always said the table doesn't need to know where you're going. It just needs to hold what you put on it. He had not understood what she meant. He thought he understood now. Kate, he said, and then he stopped because he had used the wrong name and he knew it, but she did not correct him this time, just waited. Catherine, he said, I need you to know not as a negotiation, not because it changes anything, but because it's true, I'm sorry. Not for the divorce specifically, for who I was inside the marriage, for looking at you every day and deciding you were less than you were because it was convenient for me to see it that way. She held his gaze for a long time. I know, she said. I know you are. And there was something in it that was not forgiveness. It was too clean and too distant for forgiveness, but it was the acknowledgement that the words had landed, that they were real, that they meant something even now when they could not mean everything. She stood up. She offered her hand across the table. He stood and took it. Her handshake was firm and brief, the handshake of someone who has made her position clear and considers the matter resolved. Initiate the corrections, she said. Before the end of the month, your counsel will know what to do if they're any good. She picked up her folder. She walked to the door. She paused. The engineers, she said with her back half turned. Dasan especially. Whatever happens to the company, make sure she's protected. She's done good work, and she deserves not to lose her footing because of decisions that weren't hers. He thought about Priya, who had come to him with the flag report, who had looked uncertain for the first time in 18 months, who had stayed late every night since trying to find solutions to a problem whose origin she did not fully understand. I will, he said. Kate walked out. He stood in the Ascension conference room for a moment alone with the old dark table and the weight of everything that had just happened, and then he took out his phone and called Marcus. Marcus answered on the second ring. How did it go? Get your calendar clear, Adrian said. And get our outside counsel on a call this afternoon. We need to talk about initiating a voluntary disclosure process. Marcus was quiet for 3 full seconds. Voluntary disclosure. Yes. That's... Another pause. That's a significant move. I know. It means regulatory review. It means the Series C situation becomes public. It means... I know what it means, Marcus. Silence on the line. Then carefully, okay, I'll make the calls. A beat. Can I ask what happened in there? Adrian looked at the door Kate had walked through. The door was closed. The room was quiet. Out on the street through the window, ordinary Vienna went about its ordinary business, people walking a car, moving past the small continuous machinery of a city that has survived centuries of things that seemed at the time unsurvivable. Someone told me the truth, he said, and then I told it back. Turns out it doesn't kill you. Marcus made a small sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something more complicated. I'll make the calls. Adrian hung up. He put his coat on. He picked up his briefcase. He walked out of the Ascension townhouse into the cold Vienna morning, and the door closed behind him with the same quiet, definitive sound that every door in Kate's world seemed to close, with certain and complete like a sentence that knows exactly where it ends. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Jessica. 3 messages sent between 8 and 9 that morning, the first a photo of a hotel in Tulum. The second, a series of prices for a sponsored content deal she wanted to discuss. The third, a brief and to-the-point message reading, "Where are you? You were supposed to call." He stood on the street and read all three. He thought about what Kate had said on the balcony. She told him he was extraordinary. She told him he had been wasting himself. He put his phone back in his pocket without responding. He had a car to catch, a flight home, a company that was about to go through the hardest thing it had ever gone through, and a set of choices that would determine what, if anything, emerged on the other side. He started walking. He did not think about Jessica again until the airport, and when he did think about her, it was briefly, and with a specific clarity, the clarity of a man who has spent the last 12 hours looking at real things and is finding it increasingly difficult to pretend that certain other things have any substance at all. She was the image of the life he had wanted. She had never been the life. Kate had been the life. He had looked at it every day and called it small. He boarded his flight. He found his seat. He put his briefcase under the seat in front of him and leaned his head back and closed his eyes. And for the first time since the Vienna invitation had arrived, he thought not about what he was going to do, but about who he was going to be, which is a different question and a harder one, and the one that he was beginning to understand was the only one that had ever actually mattered. The plane lifted. Below him, Vienna disappeared into cloud. Somewhere in that city, in a narrow townhouse on a quiet street, Catherine Hale Vanderbilt was already in her next meeting, managing the next decision, holding in her hands threads of power that ran through the financial architecture of the entire world. Unhurried, unimpressed, completely certain of herself, the way she had always been. He had just never looked closely enough to see it. He landed at JFK at 6:40 in the evening, and the city received him the way New York receives everyone returning from somewhere that changed them without ceremony, without acknowledgement, with the pure, indifferent momentum of 10 million people who have their own things to deal with. The cab ride from the airport was 40 minutes of tunnel and bridge, and the particular compressed ugliness of the highway into Manhattan, and Adrian sat in the back and did not look at his phone, which had accumulated 19 messages in the hours since he had last checked it, and he let them sit there unread because he was still deciding who he was going to be when he arrived, and that decision required quiet. He had told Marcus to have outside counsel ready for a call at 8. That gave him an hour and 20 minutes. He called Marcus from the cab. "How are we?" he said. "We are—" Marcus paused in the way that meant he was choosing words carefully. "Stable. Nothing new has broken in the last 12 hours. Henderson's board review is still ongoing. The Seoul situation is still quiet." Another pause. Jessica called the office. Adrian looked out the window at the bridge lights reflecting on the water below. "What did she want?" "She wanted to know if you were back. She also wanted to know—" Marcus cleared his throat. "She wanted to know whether the company was going to be okay specifically as it related to your personal liquidity." The phrasing landed with a specific weight. Not whether you are okay, whether your liquidity is okay. He filed that away with the other things he had been filing away for several weeks in the accumulating folder that he had not yet decided what to do with. "Tell her I'll be home by 7:30, he said. He was home by 7:15. Jessica was on the couch with her laptop and a wine glass, and she looked up when he came in with the expression of someone who has been rehearsing for this conversation and is now discovering that the actual conversation does not begin the way the rehearsal did. "You didn't call," she said. "I know, I'm sorry." He put his briefcase down. He did not take his coat off yet. "I had a difficult 2 days. I could see that from the 0 messages you sent." He sat down in the chair across from her. Not beside her, across which was a choice. She noticed he could see her notice it. "Jessica, I need to talk to you about the company situation, and I need to talk to you about us." She closed her laptop, slowly. Her face had gone to the careful neutral that meant she was paying attention. "The company is going to go through a voluntary disclosure process," he said. "That means we're going to the regulators proactively before they come to us. It means a review. It means the public valuation story changes significantly. It means—" He looked at her directly. "It's going to be a rough year, possibly longer. The lifestyle as it currently exists is going to have to change." She said nothing for a moment. Then, "How much change?" "Significant." "Like—" She gestured vaguely at the penthouse. "Possibly including this, yes. I don't know yet. We'll know more in 60 days. She looked at him. She looked at the apartment. She looked back at him. "What happened in Vienna?" He considered how much to say. "I got clarity," he said, "about the company, about what needs to happen." "Did you see her?" The question came out straight and clean, no performance around it. And he understood that she had been building up to it for 2 days, maybe longer. "Yes," he said, "I saw Kate. And I found out some things that I should have known before." He met her gaze. "She's not who I thought she was. She has—" He stopped, restarted. "She has a great deal of power in the financial world, more than I understood. The flag on the company originated with her." Jessica was very still. "She did this to you?" "No," he said with a firmness that surprised even him. "She identified problems that existed. I created the problems. She just looked at them honestly." "That's very generous to someone who tanked your company." "It's accurate," he said, "which is different from generous." She looked at him for a long time. Her face moved through things, and he watched it move, and what he saw was not the face of a woman who was afraid for him, or angry on his behalf, or bracing to stand beside him through something hard. What he saw was a woman calculating in real time what this information meant for her specifically and finding the result unsatisfactory. He had seen that calculation before. He had admired it once and called it ambition. "I think," Jessica said, with the careful precision of someone choosing an exit, "that maybe I need some space to think about this." He nodded. "I think that's probably honest. I don't want you to think this is about the money." He looked at her. She looked away first, which told him everything. "Take whatever time you need," he said. "Take the Tulum trip. I mean that, genuinely take it." She looked back at him, and something in her expression shifted some final layer of performance. The star emojis, the content strategy, the brand. "We are building fell away for a moment, and beneath it was a 26-year-old woman who was also in her own way trying to build something out of the materials available to her. And he did not blame her exactly. He had selected her for the same qualities he was now faulting her for, which made the faulting dishonest. "I'll stay at Camille's tonight," she said. "Okay." She picked up her phone. She picked up the wine glass. She stood. At the bedroom door, she stopped. "For what it's worth," she said, and her voice had shed the last of the performance, was just a voice young and a little tired. "I actually liked you. Not just the—" She gestured at the apartment again. "I did actually like you." "I know," he said. "I liked you too. That part was real." She nodded. She went into the bedroom. He heard her moving around, pulling a bag together. He sat in the chair and did not move. 20 minutes later, she was gone with one small bag and her ring light and the champagne star-something emoji energy that had for a few months made him feel like he was living in the right version of his life. The penthouse was very quiet. He took his coat off. He called Marcus. "Ready for the 8 o'clock, he said. "Council is on," Marcus said. "Two of them, Diane Reeves, who handles securities, and Patrick Lau for employment. I briefed them on the broad strokes." "Good." He sat at his desk. He opened his briefcase. He took out the files from Vienna, the real ones, the ones with the honest numbers. He lined them up in front of him. "Let's start." The call lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. Diane Reeves was methodical and unsentimental, the kind of attorney whose job was to tell you the full shape of what you were walking into so that you could not later claim you had not known. The voluntary disclosure, she said, would need to cover the Series C misrepresentation, the Morrow Code attribution failure, and the NDA jurisdictional issues. Each carried its own regulatory track, its own timeline, its own range of outcomes. The best case, she said, is financial penalties, mandated corrections, and enhanced oversight for a period of 3 to 5 years. Personal liability for you is possible but not certain, depending on how clearly the decision trail documents your involvement versus delegated judgment. "The decision trail is clear," Adrian said. "I made the calls." A pause on the line. "That's," Diane chose her words, "that's notable, Mr. Cross, and it will factor into how regulators respond to the disclosure. Self-reporting with clear accountability reads differently than self-reporting with strategic ambiguity." Patrick Lau covered the NDA issue. The affected employees, 43 people across multiple markets, would need to be individually notified that their agreements had been amended to restore their rights to report. Some of them, he noted carefully, might choose to do so. That was the cost of correcting the error. "I understand," Adrian said. "Some of them may report things beyond the NDA issue," Patrick said. "Things we don't know about yet." "I understand that too." After the call ended, Marcus stayed on the line. Just the two of them, the way it had been in the early years before the company had layers and departments and the particular bureaucratic density of an organization that has grown faster than its culture. "How are you actually doing?" Marcus said. Adrian had not been asked that question in a while, not by anyone who meant it. "I'm okay," he said. Then more honestly, "I'm not okay, but I think I'm going to be." "The disclosure process is going to be brutal," Marcus said. "The press will pick it up. The narrative is going to be bad for a while." "I know. And there's something else." Marcus hesitated. "I got a call today while you were traveling, from someone I didn't expect." A beat. "Priya." Adrian looked up from his files. "Priya Desan." She'd heard, I don't know how she has her sources. She'd heard that Vienna hadn't gone well, that the flag was still in place. She called to ask what was going to happen to the engineering team, whether she should start looking. Marcus paused. She didn't call for herself. She called because the 3 junior engineers on her team have mortgages, new ones. She wanted to know what to tell them. Something moved in Adrian's chest. Not guilt exactly, something more complicated, the specific weight of understanding the downstream consequences of decisions you made in offices while other people made life plans around your company's apparent stability. "Tell her to come in tomorrow," Adrian said. "Tell her I'll talk to her directly." "Okay. And Marcus," he stopped. "Thank you for staying through this." "I've been with you 11 years, Marcus said. "I'm not going anywhere because it got hard. I stayed when you were difficult. Staying when you're trying to be better is considerably easier." Adrian hung up. He sat at his desk alone. He thought about Priya calling on behalf of her team's mortgages. He thought about 43 employees whose NDAs had been wrong from the beginning. He thought about the Morrow developers, whose code had run in 4 products for 3 years without attribution. He thought about all the small decisions he had made in the interest of the company, which was in the interest of his vision, which was in the interest of his identity, and how those decisions had accumulated into a structure that Kate had looked at with clear eyes and called exactly what it was. "You didn't build a company. You built a scheme." She hadn't said those words in Vienna, but she had said them in every precise documented fact her team had laid on that table, and the meaning was identical. He opened his laptop. He began drafting the disclosure framework. Not the legal filing, Diane would handle that, but his own personal statement of what had happened and why and what he was doing about it, the kind of statement that no attorney would advise and that he was going to write anyway because he had told the truth in that Ascension conference room and found it survivable, and he intended to keep going in that direction, regardless of whether it was strategically optimal. He worked until 2 in the morning. He was still at his desk at 2 in the morning for the second night in a row, but the quality of the 2 in the morning was completely different from every other 2 in the morning he had spent in this apartment. Before 2 in the morning had been the time of expansion, bigger projections, more aggressive timelines, the intoxicating arithmetic of building something larger. This 2 in the morning was the time of accounting which was harder and slower and produced none of the exhilaration, but had in it something he recognized dimly from a very long time ago from his father's house in Ohio, from the face of a man who worked honestly with his hands and slept without difficulty. He saved his draft. He closed his laptop. He stood up and stretched and went to the kitchen and made himself a cup of tea, because Kate had always made tea at this hour, and he had always made coffee, and tonight the coffee felt wrong, and sometimes the smallest adjustments are the ones that tell you the most about where you have arrived. He stood at the kitchen window with his tea and looked at Manhattan and let himself see it differently than he usually did not. As territory, not as a measure of distance from Ohio, but just as a city complicated and imperfect and full of people who were all in their various ways trying to figure out the difference between what they had built and what it had cost them. He had a press conference in 2 days. Diane had recommended 3 days, but he had said 2 because every additional day was a day in which he was still choosing delay over honesty, and he was done with that particular choice. His phone showed one new message sent at 11:47. Unknown number. He opened it. It was 4 words. The engineers are protected. No signature. No context needed. He read it twice. He set his phone on the counter. He looked out the window for a while longer. She had made calls on his behalf, quietly, without announcement. Not because she owed him anything, she owed him nothing less than nothing, but because she had told him Priya's work was valuable, and she meant what she said, and when Catherine Hale Vanderbilt said something, she did not require credit for following through. He thought about 5 years of that, 5 years of a woman who meant what she said and followed through without requiring credit, and how he had looked at that quality every day and classified it as smallness. He finished his tea. He went to bed. He slept, which surprised him. Not well, not long, but genuinely, which was more than he had managed in the last several weeks combined. Something had settled in him. Not resolved resolution was a long way off, perhaps permanently off, but settled the way sediment settles in water when the current finally stops. In the morning, he called Priya. She answered immediately, which told him she had been expecting the call. "I heard you called Marcus yesterday," he said. "I did." Her voice was steady. She had always been steady. He had always taken that steadiness for granted. "I needed to know what to tell my team." "Tell them they have jobs," he said. "I can't tell you exactly what those jobs will look like in 6 months because I can't tell you exactly what the company will look like. But the engineering team, your work specifically, is the part of this that has real value. Whatever happens to the rest of it, that's the part that survives." Silence on the line. "I also need to tell you something," he continued. "We're initiating a voluntary disclosure, regulatory review. Some of what comes out is going to be things that happened before you were here, but some of it happened while you were here, and I want you to hear it from me before you read it anywhere else." He paused. "If you need to leave, I understand. If you stay, I'll make sure your contribution is documented and protected in any restructuring. But the decision is yours, with full information." She was quiet for a long moment. "Did something happen in Vienna?" He was struck again by how often that question was being asked, and by how different the true answer was from any version he could give out loud. "Yes," he said. "Something good or something bad." He thought about it. "Both," he said, at the same time, which is apparently how the real things go. Another silence. "I'll stay," she said, "for now, and I want to be in the room for the disclosure prep." "You will be." He hung up. He had 3 calls before the press conference prep. He had a statement to finalize. He had 43 names on a list that Patrick Lau had sent overnight. 43 people who needed to receive notification that the agreements they had signed were being voided, that their rights were restored, that the company was acknowledging the error. He picked up the list. He looked at the names. Real people with mortgages and plans, and the ordinary complexity of lives built around the assumption that the institution they worked for was operating honestly. He had asked Kate once early in the marriage what she thought made a company genuinely worth something. She had thought about it for a moment, she always thought before she answered, which he had found slow, and was now understanding was precision, and she had said, whether the people inside it can trust it. Not the investors, not the market. The people inside it. He had said that was idealistic. She had said it was foundational, and there was a difference. He put the list in his briefcase. He put his coat on. He went to the elevator. The doors opened. He stepped in. The elevator descended and the numbers counted down. And somewhere in the city on a quiet morning, 43 people were going about their lives, not yet knowing that something was about to be given back to them. And the woman who had made that indirectly possible was already 12 moves ahead in a game that Adrian Cross was only now learning the rules of. He stepped out into the lobby. He walked through the door into the city. Whatever came next was going to be hard. He knew that with the clarity of someone who has stopped lying to himself, which turns out to be a surprisingly efficient way to assess a situation. Hard and long and uncertain in ways he could not fully map from here. But he was walking toward it instead of away from it. That was new. That he thought stepping into the cold Manhattan morning with his briefcase and his list of 43 names was the first genuinely true thing he had done in years. The press conference was at 10 in the morning in a room that held 40 journalists and felt like it held 400 because rooms where true things are about to be said have a specific atmospheric pressure that has nothing to do with the number of people inside them. Adrian stood at the podium with his statement in front of him, printed on 3 pages, that he had revised 11 times between 2 in the morning and 7 when he had finally stopped revising and accepted that the words were as honest as he was capable of making them, and that was what they needed to be. Marcus was in the back row. Diane was to his left, slightly off camera, because she had advised him strongly against doing this without a lawyer visibly present, and he had listened. On that point, because she was right. Priya was there too. He had not asked her to come. She had shown up. He looked at her when he walked in. She gave him a single nod that communicated in the particular compressed language of people who have worked together closely for years. Something like, "I see what you're doing and I think it's right, and I'm here," he began. He read the statement without performance. No pauses for effect, no emotional inflation, no strategic warmth. Just the words in order, which said what had happened and acknowledged his role in it and described what was being done about it. The Series C projections, the Morrow Code, the NDAs, his own decision-making at each juncture, his own choices. The room was very quiet while he read. When he finished, he put the statement down and looked up. "I'll take questions," he said. The first questions were the obvious ones: magnitude of the regulatory exposure timeline for the disclosure process, what it meant for existing investors. He answered them directly. The fourth question came from a woman in the second row who had the compact forward-leaning posture of someone who covers financial accountability stories for a living. "Mr. Cross," she said, "voluntary disclosures of this scope are unusual. They typically happen under pressure either from whistleblowers or from regulatory contact. Can you tell us what prompted this one?" He looked at her. He had prepared an answer for this question. The prepared answer was truthful, but incomplete. He set it aside. "Someone I trust told me the truth about what I'd built," he said, "and I decided that if someone else could see it that clearly, I could say it that clearly. That's the whole story." She wrote something. She did not look satisfied, which told him she would be following this story for a long time, which was fine. Stories that get followed are stories that stay honest because the people following them eventually find the gaps. He walked out of the press conference with Marcus beside him and Diane on his phone, providing real-time commentary on the questions she had found concerning, and the street outside was an ordinary New York street, indifferent as always, and someone had photographed him from across the road on a phone, and the photo would be online within the hour, and that was fine too. "It went as well as it could have," Marcus said. "It went honestly," Adrian said, "which is different." "Not always. Today, it's the same." By that afternoon, the story was running. Financial press, then general press, then the particular ecosystem of financial social media where analysis and speculation and outrage cycle through each other rapidly and produce a specific kind of heat that is not quite journalism and not quite rumor, but something in between that moves faster than either. Cross Dynamics stock dropped 14% by close. Adrian watched the number on his phone with the detachment of someone watching weather-relevant, real, not personally surprising. He had known it would drop. He had known worse might come. What he had not quite prepared for was the personal coverage. By evening, several outlets had connected the voluntary disclosure to his divorce to the Ascension Trust flag, and with varying levels of accuracy to the identity of Kate as Catherine Hale Vanderbilt. The Vanderbilt name had its own gravitational pull in financial media. Stories about the Ascension Trust, normally impossible to report on because the trust generated no public-facing information, were suddenly everywhere. All of them incomplete, most of them wrong in interesting ways. His phone had a message from an unknown number at 6:17, same number as the forward text from 2 nights before. It said, "You did it correctly. That's noted." He read it. He put his phone down. He sat with it for a moment, the particular sensation of being seen accurately by someone you have badly misjudged, which is a specific kind of grace that you cannot ask for and cannot manufacture and can only receive with the humility it requires. Jessica's name appeared in 2 of the articles briefly as the girlfriend in the context of the divorce narrative. She had posted nothing on her social media since the night she left for Camille's. He had not contacted her. He suspected she was watching the coverage and running her own calculation, and that the calculation was not resolving in favor of reconnection. He found he could not summon a strong feeling about this, which itself told him something that he had probably known for weeks. 3 days after the press conference, the SEC made contact. Diane took the call and reported back to Adrian with the specific professional calm of someone who has navigated this before and is choosing her tone carefully. "They're not hostile," she said. "The voluntary disclosure changes the dynamic significantly. They want documents and a formal interview. I'll handle the logistics. The interview will be in about 30 days. "Fine," he said. "Adrian," she paused, "you should know this is going to take approximately 2 years to fully resolve. The penalties will be real. The oversight period will be real. There will be days when it feels like you traded a short-term problem for a much longer one." I know. I need you to know it on the hard days, not just today. I know, he said again more slowly. I grew up watching my father come home tired every night from work that was honest and not especially rewarded. I spent my whole adult life deciding I would never live like that. And somewhere in that decision, I stopped understanding the difference between tired from honest work and tired from pretending. He stopped. I understand it now. I can hold it. Diane was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said. I believe you. The Henderson contract did not survive. The board review concluded, as these reviews tend to conclude when the news cycle is running against you, in a decision to terminate the partnership pending regulatory resolution with the possibility of re-engagement at a later date. A phrase that in Adrian's experience meant never, with a polite door left ajar. He received the formal notification on a Tuesday morning and read it and put it in the regulatory file and moved to the next item on his list, because the list had become how he organized the process of accountability item by item, and stopping to grieve each loss was a luxury that the list did not permit. Priya had stayed. She had done more than stay. She had become, over the 3 weeks since Vienna, the most valuable person in the building. Not because her engineering work had changed, but because everyone in the company was watching how leadership handled pressure, and Priya was the one person who appeared to know what to do with the answer, which was to keep working on real things with real precision and let the work speak for what it was worth. He called her into his office on the 4th week. I need to tell you something, he said, about the restructuring. She sat across from him with her notebook open because she always had her notebook. He had taken her readiness for granted for so long that seeing it now clearly felt like the adjustment of a lens that had been slightly wrong for years. Cross Dynamics as it currently exists is going to wind down, he said. The regulatory process, the investor withdrawals, the valuation correction, the math doesn't hold together for the full company. But the core engineering work, your team's work there, is interest in that specifically. Real interest. From a firm I trust. He held her gaze. I want to facilitate a transition that keeps your team intact and places you in a context where the work gets the support it deserves. Not as a favor, as a recognition of what the work actually is. She looked at him for a long moment. Who's the firm? He told her. It was a technology infrastructure group mid-sized, known in the industry for quiet competence and long-term thinking, the kind of organization that did not care about brand optics because its work was so foundational that it didn't need them. Priya knew the name. Her expression moved through something recognition calibration, a question she decided to ask. How did this connection come about? He was honest. Someone with reach made an introduction. I didn't ask for it. It arrived. She looked at him. She was smart enough to understand the implication without requiring it to be spelled out. The same someone as the 4 words the other night, she said, which told him that she knew about the text, which meant Marcus had told her, which meant Marcus considered her inside the circle of people who needed the full picture. He did not confirm it or deny it. He said, the introduction is real and the interest is genuine and the decision is yours. She looked at her notebook. She looked at him. My team's mortgages, she said, are secure under any transition structure I can negotiate, he said. That's a condition, not a hope. She nodded. She closed her notebook. I'll talk to the team this afternoon. She stood to leave, and at the door she stopped, which was becoming a pattern in his life. People stopping at doors, and she said without turning around, you should know that the way you've handled the last month, it matters. To people who work for you and watched you do it, that's not nothing. He had not expected that. He did not know what to do with it except say, thank you, Priya. She left. He sat for a while. The restructuring took 3 months to formalize. 41 of the 43 employees whose NDAs had been voided accepted the company's acknowledgement without filing additional reports. 2 did file. The reports added 2 additional items to the SEC review, both real, both his, both handled. Diane said the regulators had noted his consistency. She said it in the same careful way she said everything, but he heard beneath it that consistency and accountability was not something they encountered as often as they should. The penthouse sold in the 2nd month. He had listed it at a price that reflected urgency without desperation, and it had moved quickly because Manhattan penthouses always move if the price is correct, and the price was correct because he had done the math honestly for the first time in a long time. He moved into an apartment on the Upper West Side, smaller, quieter, with a kitchen that had not cost $200,000 and windows that looked at a courtyard rather than a skyline. He found he preferred the courtyard. Jessica resurfaced briefly in the fourth month in a profile piece in a digital magazine that covered the influencer-adjacent celebrity world. She had a new relationship, a founder type younger than Adrian, with a different company, and the same aspirational energy that Adrian had once projected. The piece mentioned him in a single sentence as a previous relationship, and she was quoted saying she had learned a lot from it, which was gracious in the way that things are gracious when they are also final. He wished her well, sincerely, from a distance, which is the correct way to wish someone well when you were never the right thing for each other. At the 6-month mark, he received a letter, physical again on the same heavy cardstock as the Vienna invitation with the same absence of logo. No return address. Inside was a check. $10. And a card on which was written in handwriting he recognized after 5 years of grocery lists and birthday cards and the small paper trail of a shared life. You are worth exactly what you treated me as. This is not cruelty. This is the final accounting. What you do from here is yours entirely. Below the words, a single line, I hope you choose correctly. I think you will. No signature. None needed. He held the check for a long time. $10. The judgment was exact, and it was surgical, and it was, he understood also in its specific way, a door being closed with the same quiet finality as every door in Kate's world. Not a wall. A closed door. The difference matters. He folded the card. He put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, in the same place where he had once carried a folded piece of paper with her full name on it, in a Vienna hotel room when he was still in the process of understanding who she was. He kept the $10 check. He did not deposit it. He framed it. Small, plain frame, the kind that costs nothing. He put it on the desk in the new apartment, not as a monument to shame, but as a calibration instrument. The kind of thing you look at when you need to remember the exact cost of confusing confidence with clarity, performance with substance, the image of a life with the life itself. He went back to work. Different work, not building the next thing for the sake of building the next thing, but consulting case by case with companies that needed someone who understood from the inside what it looked like when the foundation was wrong. He was good at it. It turned out that the most useful application of his particular intelligence was not in construction, but in diagnosis, in seeing the gap between what a company said it was and what it actually was, and helping the people inside it close that gap before it closed them. He charged honest rates, he worked honest hours, he slept. On an ordinary Tuesday evening in the 18th month after Vienna, he was watching something on television, a documentary about a thing he had no professional interest in, which was new, and which he was coming to appreciate as a form of mental space. He had not previously allowed himself when his phone showed a news alert. He did not usually read news alerts in the evening, but something about the name in the preview made him open it. Catherine Hale Vanderbilt had been named to the advisory board of the International Monetary Fund's Sovereign Wealth Governance Committee, the first private trust chair to hold such a position. The article noted her age, her track record at Ascension, the historic nature of the appointment. There was a photograph official, slightly formal, taken at some institutional event. She was in a dark jacket, her hair down, the pearl earrings visible if you looked closely. She looked exactly like herself. He read the article twice. He put his phone down. He looked at the framed $10 check on his desk for a moment, and then he looked at the courtyard outside his window where a tree he had not paid attention to was apparently in the process of coming into spring. He had not noticed it before. He noticed it now. He thought about what she had said on the balcony in Vienna. What you do from here is yours entirely. He thought about everything that had come after the press conference, the SEC meetings, the restructuring, the smaller apartment, the work that was honest if not grand, and he understood that the statement had not been a dismissal. It had been in the precise language of a woman who means exactly what she says, an act of faith. Small, unannounced, offered once, and not repeated. The kind of faith that does not require a response. The kind that is complete in itself. He turned off the television. He made tea. He stood at the window with the mug in both hands and looked at the tree coming into spring in the courtyard, and he let himself feel, without performing it for anyone, the particular texture of a life that was smaller than the one he had built and more real than anything he had ever lived inside. He did not know where Kate was that evening. He did not need to know. She was somewhere in the world doing the next right thing with the full weight of who she actually was, building a legacy that would exist long after every index and rating and institutional flag had been updated, amended, and revised. She was moving through the world the way she had always moved through it, without announcement, without requiring acknowledgement, with the complete and unassailable authority of someone who has never once confused their net worth with their actual worth. He had been in the same rooms as that authority for 5 years and called it ordinary. The cost of that misreading had been total. His company, his public standing, 2 years of grinding accountability, the relationship he had chosen over her, the version of himself he had been most proud of, all of it gone, stripped back, reduced to what was actually there beneath the construction. What was actually there was smaller than he had believed, but it was real. And real, he had learned at considerable expense, is the only material that holds. In the years that followed, Catherine Hale Vanderbilt became exactly what her name and her judgment had always been, moving toward a figure of genuine global consequence, the kind whose decisions shaped institutions rather than reflected them. The Ascension Trust, under her full stewardship, became a standard-bearer for ethical institutional investment, the organization that other organizations referenced when they needed to demonstrate that power and principle were not mutually exclusive. She built a life on her own terms, her time, her choices, her relationships defined entirely by the same standard she had applied to everything else, whether the thing in question was real. She found that eventually, the real thing. A man who knew exactly who she was from the beginning, who did not require her to be less in order to feel sufficient beside her, who looked at her gray cardigan on a Sunday morning and understood without being told that it was not a concession but a choice, and that the difference between those two things was everything. She built a family on that understanding, small and solid and certain of itself, the way only things built on honest foundations can be certain. Adrian Cross did not rebuild an empire. He did not try. He built slowly and with considerable difficulty a version of himself that could be trusted by his clients, by the people who worked with him, by the face that looked back at him from mirrors in a modest apartment on the Upper West Side, with a courtyard and a spring tree and a framed $10 check on the desk. He was not remarkable. He was honest. He was useful. He slept. He never contacted Kate again. He did not try. Some doors close with a click that is also a conclusion, and the only respectful response to that sound is to understand that the room behind it was never yours to re-enter. But he thought about her. Not with longing, not with regret in the shape of wanting things back, with the specific clear-eyed gratitude of a man who knows that the most important education of his life had been administered by someone who owed him nothing, who had looked at his worst and told him the truth anyway, and who had walked away with the door shut behind her and left him standing in the silence with everything he needed to become someone worth the silence. He had thrown away the only real wealth he ever had. He had not replaced it. Some things cannot be replaced, and the acceptance of that fact is not defeat. It is the beginning of the only life that was ever going to be worth living. The tree in the courtyard came into bloom every spring. He always noticed it. That was enough. That was in the final accounting that matters exactly enough.